Morrison set down his coffee cup and looked at the main screen. A massive alien ship had just dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system. The vessel was unlike anything in human records. It looked like someone had taken a mountain and covered it in black metal and sharp edges. "Sir, we're getting a transmission," said Communications Officer Ben Carter. His hands moved quickly over the control panel. "It's coming through on multiple frequencies. They want to talk." Jake nodded. "Put it through." The main screen flickered and showed the interior of the alien ship. The creature that appeared made several crew members step back. It stood nearly 8 feet tall with dark green scales that seemed to absorb light. Its eyes glowed amber, like hot coals. Sharp claws extended from its fingers, and when it spoke, rows of needle-sharp teeth became visible. "I am War Prime Kethavar of the Zephyrian Empire," the alien said. Its voice was deep and carried the weight of absolute authority. "Your species will surrender immediately or face complete destruction. We have conquered 17 star systems. Your resistance would be meaningless." Jake kept his expression calm. He had been in tight spots before during the Mars colonial wars. "I'm Captain Jake Morrison of the Earth Defense Coalition. We appreciate you making contact, but we'll need to discuss this through proper diplomatic channels." The alien's eyes flared brighter. "There will be no discussion. You have 1 Earth rotation to respond. Surrender or die." The transmission ended. Jake turned to his crew. "Get me Admiral Peters on the line, and contact Ambassador Lisa Grant. Tell her we need the diplomatic team ready for immediate deployment." 3 hours later, Ambassador Lisa Grant stood in the shuttle bay of Nexus 7, the neutral space station that served as a meeting point between Earth and various alien species. She was a small woman with gray hair and kind eyes, but everyone who knew her understood that she could negotiate with anyone about anything. "You sure about this, Ambassador?" asked Commander Alex Parker. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with scars on his hands from his time fighting in the asteroid belt conflicts. "These aliens don't seem like the talking type." Lisa adjusted her diplomatic uniform. "Every species talks, Alex. They might use different words, but they all want something. Our job is to figure out what that is." The rest of the human team gathered around them. Dr. Emma Collins checked her scanning equipment one more time. She studied alien biology and had seen some strange things in her career, but nothing quite like what the Zephyrians had shown them. Captain Danny Rogers stretched his back and yawned. He had been up for 18 hours straight getting ready for this meeting. "Danny, you okay?" asked Engineer Betty Wilson. She was young, but had already designed 3 different types of defensive systems for Earth's outer colonies. "Just tired," Danny said. "Long trip out here, but I'm good to go." Lieutenant Kevin Brooks pulled up the files on his tablet. "I've been reading everything we have about the Zephyrian Empire. They've never lost a war. Every species they've contacted has either surrendered immediately or been wiped out." "Well, there's a first time for everything," Lisa said. The airlock hissed open and the Zephyrian delegation entered the meeting room. War Prime Kethavar led the group, followed by 5 other warriors in black armor. Each one stood over 7 feet tall, and their scales seemed to shift color in the artificial light. Their claws clicked against the metal floor as they walked. The humans remained seated at the conference table. Lisa had specifically chosen not to stand, knowing that the height difference would be used as a psychological weapon. The Zephyrians clearly expected the humans to show fear or submission. "You received our message," Kethavar said. It was not a question. "We did," Lisa replied calmly. "And we're here to discuss alternatives to unnecessary conflict." The War Primes' amber eyes narrowed. "There are no alternatives. Your species lacks the strength to resist us. We have weapons that can destroy planets. We have warriors who have never known defeat. We have creatures that exist beyond your understanding of reality." Dr. Collins leaned forward slightly. "That sounds fascinating from a scientific perspective. We'd love to learn more about your technology and biology." The comment clearly confused the Zephyrian leader. Species usually begged for their lives at this point in the conversation. They did not express scientific curiosity about their destroyers. Commander Parker spoke up. You mentioned creatures beyond our understanding. Are you talking about weapons or actual living beings? The Void Render, Kethvar said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. It is death itself given form. It exists in the spaces between dimensions. No force in this galaxy can stand against it. Danny Rogers rubbed his eyes and yawned again. Sorry, been a long day. This Void Render thing, is it intelligent? Or more like a really big attack dog? The question hung in the air. The Zephyrian warriors exchanged glances. In their culture, discussing their ultimate weapon in such casual terms bordered on blasphemy. It is not an animal, Kethvar said slowly. It is the end of civilizations, the final argument in any conflict. Right, but does it think for itself? Danny pressed. Because if it's intelligent, then it's not really a weapon, is it? It's more like a person who happens to be really good at fighting. Betty Wilson nodded. That's an important distinction. Weapons don't have rights, but people do. The Zephyrians stared at the humans in complete silence. In their thousands of years of conquest, no species had ever suggested that their ultimate weapon might have individual rights or personal autonomy. Lisa saw an opening. War Prime Kethvar, we appreciate you taking the time to meet with us. However, Earth's position is simple. We don't surrender to anyone, but we're always willing to talk about mutual cooperation and trade agreements. You refuse our terms? We're offering better terms, Lisa said with a smile. Why conquer us when you could work with us? Humans are pretty good at solving problems. Maybe we could help you solve some of yours. The War Prime stood abruptly, his claws extending to their full length. You will see the power of the Zephyrian Empire. Tomorrow we will demonstrate why resistance is futile. Prepare your minds for terror beyond imagination. As the aliens left the meeting room, Kevin Brooks shook his head. I think we just made them really angry. Good, said Alex Parker. Angry people make mistakes. Danny Rogers was already thinking about the creature they had described. In his years working with animals on Earth's nature preserves, he had learned that every living thing, no matter how dangerous, had basic needs and behaviors. If this Void Render was truly alive, then it probably had those same needs. Emma, he said to Dr. Collins, what do you think about their description of this creature? She frowned thoughtfully. It sounds like they've turned a living being into a weapon. That usually doesn't end well for anyone involved, including the creature itself. Lisa gathered her papers. Well, we'll find out tomorrow. Everyone get some rest. Something tells me we're going to need all our energy for whatever they have planned. The human delegation returned to their quarters on Nexus 7, unaware that their casual response to the Zephyrian threats had already begun to spread through the alien ship's crew. Warriors who had never questioned their methods began to wonder why the humans seemed so unconcerned. War Prime Kethvar stood alone in his command chamber, staring out at the small blue planet in the distance. In all his campaigns, fear had been his greatest ally. But these humans appeared to feel no fear at all. Tomorrow's demonstration would change that. It had to. The Void Render waited in its containment chamber, as it had for countless battles before. But for the first time in its existence, it found itself wondering about the strange creatures who had asked if it could sit. The question echoed in its ancient mind like a puzzle that demanded solving. The next morning came too quickly for the human delegation. Ambassador Lisa Grant had spent most of the night reading reports about Zephyrian military tactics. None of them ended well for the opposing side. She met her team in the station's cafeteria for what might be their last breakfast. Any word from Earth? Asked Commander Alex Parker, stirring sugar into his coffee. Admiral Peters sent a message, Lisa said. Earth stands behind our decision. No surrender, but we keep trying to find a peaceful solution. Captain Danny Rogers picked at his scrambled eggs. He had barely slept, not from fear, but because he kept thinking about the creature the aliens had described. Something about their War Prime's description bothered him. The way Kethvar spoke about the Void Render reminded him of how some people talked about dangerous animals. They saw only the threat, never the living being underneath. Danny, you're looking thoughtful, said Dr. Emma Collins. What's on your mind? Just thinking about their pet monster, Danny said. If it's really as powerful as they claim, why do they need to threaten us at all? Why not just send it to Earth and be done with it? Engineer Betty Wilson looked up from her tablet. Maybe because it's not as controllable as they want us to believe. Lieutenant Kevin Brooks joined them at the table. I've been monitoring Zephyrian communications. Their crew seems nervous about today's demonstration. That's not normal behavior for a conquering army. At exactly noon, the human delegation was escorted to Cargo Bay 7. The space was enormous, big enough to hold several shuttlecraft. The Zephyrians had cleared everything out and set up what looked like an arena. Their warriors stood along the walls in full battle armor, their amber eyes glowing with anticipation. War Prime Kethvar stood in the center of the bay. "Humans of Earth," he said, his voice echoing off the metal walls, "you will now witness the power that has brought low the greatest civilizations in this galaxy. You will understand why resistance is meaningless." He raised his clawed hand and spoke words in the Zephyrian language. The air in the center of the bay began to shimmer like heat waves rising from summer pavement. A low humming sound filled the space, growing louder and deeper until everyone could feel it in their bones. The shimmer grew darker, more solid. Something was pushing through from somewhere else. The temperature in the bay dropped 10 degrees in seconds. Emergency lighting kicked in as the main lights flickered and dimmed. Then the void render emerged. Danny had seen some big animals in his time. He had worked with elephants and whales, creatures that could make a person feel very small. But this thing was different. It stood 12 feet tall at what might have been its shoulders. Its body seemed to be made of living shadow that occasionally revealed glimpses of something solid underneath. Multiple rows of teeth caught the emergency lighting like crystal formations in a cave. Its eyes were points of white fire that hurt to look at directly. Tentacles moved around its body, sometimes solid, sometimes fading to smoke before becoming real again. The creature turned its massive head to survey the room, and every human felt the weight of its attention like a physical force. "Behold," War Prime Kethvar said, "the void render. It has destroyed the fleets of the Andromedans. It has consumed the crystal cities of Vega Prime. It has—" "Wow," Danny interrupted, yawning widely. "That's really something." The War Prime stopped mid-sentence. The other Zephyrians turned to stare at the human who had just yawned in the presence of their ultimate weapon. The void render demonstrated its power by reaching out with one tentacle and passing it through a solid steel support beam. The metal simply ceased to exist where the tentacle touched it. The creature could apparently delete matter from reality itself. Betty Wilson watched the display with professional interest. Fascinating. Some kind of dimensional phasing ability. I wonder if it works on organic matter too. The beast turned toward her voice, its burning eyes fixed on the small human engineer who showed no sign of fear. For a moment, the cargo bay was completely silent except for the hum of the station's life support systems. "It's beautiful in a way," said Dr. Collins quietly. "Look at how it moves. There's intelligence there, real awareness." Commander Parker nodded. "Definitely not just a mindless weapon. It's thinking about us as much as we're thinking about it." The Zephyrian warriors began to shift uncomfortably. This was not how other species had reacted to the void render. Usually there was screaming by now, sometimes fainting, always terror. War Prime Kethvar decided to escalate the demonstration. "Void render," he commanded. "Show them the fate of those who resist the Empire." The creature turned its attention to a stack of metal cargo containers at the far end of the bay. It moved forward with fluid grace, its tentacles reaching out to touch the containers. Each one simply vanished, as if it had never existed. The display of power was absolute and terrifying. Danny Rogers watched the demonstration with the same expression he might use to watch a dog perform tricks. When the creature finished destroying the containers, he looked up at it and asked, "That's pretty cool, but can you do anything else?" The question seemed to catch everyone off guard. The void render tilted its massive head and stared down at the human who had just asked it about its other abilities. No one had ever asked it what else it could do besides destroy things. "What do you mean?" War Prime Kethvar demanded. "Danny, shrugged. Well, it's obviously really good at making things disappear, but that's just one skill. Most intelligent beings can do lots of different things. I'm curious what else it's capable of. Dr. Collins stepped closer to get a better look at the creature's behavior patterns. Its posture suggests it's processing. Your question. Look at how its tentacles are moving. That's not aggressive positioning, it's more like it's thinking. The void render continued to stare at Danny. Its burning eyes seemed less intense now, more curious than threatening. The creature had spent countless years being summoned only to destroy. The concept of having other abilities had never been presented to it before. You will show proper fear, one of the Zephyrian warriors hissed at the humans. The void render is death incarnate. I'm sure it's very good at its job, said Betty Wilson. But calling any living being death incarnate seems a bit unfair. Everything alive has value beyond what it can destroy. Kevin Brooks was taking notes on his tablet. How long has the void render been with your empire? War Prime Kethvar's claws extended slightly. It has served us for over 2,000 of your years. 2,000 years? Emma Collins looked shocked. That's a long time to have only one job. Has it ever been allowed to do anything besides fight? The question clearly confused the Zephyrian leader. It is a weapon. Weapons do not require other purposes. But you said it was intelligent, Danny pointed out. Intelligent beings usually want to do more than just one thing their whole lives. It must get boring after a while. The void render made a sound that was not quite a roar. It was softer, more complex. The creature seemed to be trying to communicate something beyond simple threat display. Lisa Grant watched the interaction with growing interest. War Prime Kethvar, has anyone ever tried to communicate directly with the void render? Not giving it orders, but actually talking to it? Why would we do such a thing? Because it's clearly trying to tell us something right now, Lisa said. All eyes turned back to the creature. Its tentacles were moving in slow, deliberate patterns. Its head turned from human to human, as if studying each one individually. The burning intensity in its eyes had dimmed to something that looked almost like curiosity. Alex Parker had seen enough combat to recognize when a situation was changing. I don't think it wants to fight us, War Prime Kethvar snarled. The void render exists to destroy our enemies. It has no other desires. Maybe it didn't before, said Danny Rogers quietly, but it seems like it might be developing some new interests. The creature took a step toward the human delegation. Every Zephyrian warrior tensed, ready for battle. But the void render's movement was not aggressive. It was careful, almost gentle. It stopped just a few feet away from Danny and lowered its massive head to his eye level. For a long moment, human and cosmic horror stared at each other in complete silence. Then Danny smiled and said, Hello there, big guy. You doing okay? The void render made that soft sound again. Its tentacles moved, in what could only be described as a pleased wiggle. War Prime Kethvar stared in complete disbelief. His ultimate weapon, the destroyer of worlds, was apparently having a friendly conversation with a human. This had never happened before in the entire history of the Zephyrian Empire. This is impossible, he whispered. Actually, said Dr. Collins, this makes perfect sense. Any intelligent being wants social interaction. It's been alone for 2,000 years with no one to talk to except people giving it orders to destroy things. Of course it would be interested in a real conversation. The BIME demonstration was not going according to plan. The void render continued to study Danny Rogers with what could only be called interest. Its massive form blocked out most of the overhead lighting, casting long shadows across the cargo bay floor. The creature's tentacles moved in slow, thoughtful patterns that reminded Dr. Emma Collins of how octopi explored new environments. War Prime Kethvar stepped forward, his authority clearly shaken by the unexpected turn of events. Void Render, you will demonstrate your power upon these humans. Show them why resistance is futile. The creature turned its burning gaze toward the Zephyrian leader but made no move to attack. Instead, it looked back at Danny, who was rubbing his lower back and shifting his weight from foot to foot. Man, these station chairs are killing me, Danny muttered to himself. Then he looked up at the towering creature and asked the question. That would change everything. Hey, this might sound weird, but do you know how to sit? Because you look way more comfortable than any of us right now. The cargo bay fell completely silent. Even the background hum of the station's life support systems seemed to pause. War Prime Kithvar's amber eyes flickered with confusion. The other Zephyrian warriors looked at each other as if they had misheard the human's words. The Void Render tilted its massive head to one side, processing this entirely new concept. In its 2,000 years of existence, it had been asked to destroy, to terrorize, to consume, and to obliterate. Never once had anyone asked if it could sit. You just asked our ultimate weapon if it knows how to sit, said one of the Zephyrian warriors slowly. Yeah, Danny said, completely unaware of the revolutionary nature of his question. I mean, standing around all the time has got to be tiring, right? Even for something as tough as this guy. Ambassador Lisa Grant recognized the moment for what it was. Sometimes in negotiations, everything hinged on one unexpected moment. This was one of those times. It's a reasonable question, she said calmly. Comfort is important for any thinking being. Engineer Betty Wilson pulled out a protein bar and unwrapped it. Anyone else hungry? I always get snacky when I'm nervous. Lieutenant Kevin Brooks looked around the bay and pointed to some storage units along the wall. There are some decent places to sit over there if anyone wants to get comfortable. The casual responses from the humans seemed to create a feedback loop of confusion among the Zephyrians. Their entire strategy was based on inspiring fear through overwhelming displays of power. But these humans were discussing snacks and seating arrangements. Commander Alex Parker noticed something important. The creature hasn't moved since Danny asked his question. It's just standing there thinking. Dr. Collins stepped closer to observe the Void Render's behavior. Look at its posture. The aggressive stance is gone. Its tentacles aren't writhing anymore. They're moving in much slower, more deliberate patterns. The creature's burning eyes remained fixed on Danny Rogers. Something was happening in its ancient mind, a process that had never occurred before. The simple question about sitting had opened a door to thoughts and possibilities that had been locked away for millennia. This is unacceptable, War Prime Kethvar declared. Void Render, you will attack these humans immediately. The creature turned to look at its commander but did not move to obey. Instead, it made a sound that was half roar, half something else entirely. The sound carried notes of confusion, curiosity, and perhaps even frustration. Did it just talk back to him? Asked Betty Wilson. I think it did, said Kevin Brooks, and I don't think the big boss man is happy about it. War Prime Kethvar's scales darkened with anger. The Void Render does not question orders. It exists only to serve the Empire. Danny Rogers looked from the alien commander to the massive creature and back again. Well, that seems kind of unfair. I mean, if it's smart enough to understand orders, it's smart enough to have opinions about those orders. The Void Render made that complex sound again, this time with what sounded almost like agreement. Oh, this is fascinating, Dr. Collins said, pulling out her scanner. Its biorhythms are completely different from when it first appeared. The aggression markers are gone. It's displaying patterns consistent with active cognitive processing. In simple terms? Asked Alex Parker. It's thinking really hard about something, Emma explained. And whatever it's thinking about, it's not related to fighting. The creature suddenly moved, but not toward the humans. Instead, it lowered itself down until its massive bulk was resting on the cargo bay floor. It had, in its own way, sat down. Danny Rogers grinned. There we go. See? Much better. He walked over to a nearby storage container and sat down himself, his back finally getting some relief. Now everyone can relax a bit. The Zephyrian warriors stared in absolute shock. Their ultimate weapon, the terror of 17 star systems, was sitting on the floor like a well-trained pet. More than that, it seemed pleased with itself for figuring out how to do it. This is impossible, whispered one of the alien warriors. This is blasphemy, hissed another. War Prime Kethvar's control over the situation was slipping away rapidly. Void Render, Stand and prepare for battle. The creature looked at him, then looked at Danny Rogers sitting comfortably on his storage container, then made a decision. It remained sitting. I don't think it wants to fight right now, said Danny. Maybe it's tired. 2,000 years is a long time to be on active duty. Betty Wilson sat down on another container. You know what? This is actually much better for negotiations. Everyone's more comfortable when they can sit down. One by one, the human delegation found places to sit around the cargo bay. They made themselves comfortable as if they were settling in for a pleasant afternoon conversation, rather than facing the most dangerous creature in known space. The Void Render watched this process with obvious interest. Its tentacles moved in, patterns that seemed almost excited. For the first time in its existence, it was surrounded by beings who were not afraid of it. Lisa Grant saw an opportunity and took it. War Prime Kethvar, would you like to sit down too? These conversations work better when everyone feels comfortable. The Zephyrian leader's claws extended to their full length. I do not sit in the presence of prey. We're not prey, said Alex Parker calmly. We're people having a conversation. Big difference. The Void Render turned its attention to War Prime Kethvar and made a sound that was definitely questioning. The creature seemed to be asking its commander why he would not sit when everyone else was comfortable. You see, said Danny to the creature, some people are just too proud to admit when they're tired, but you figured it out just fine. The beast's response was something that sounded remarkably like approval. Dr. Collins was documenting everything on her scanner. This is unprecedented. We're witnessing the first recorded instance of a Void Render engaging in social behavior. Kevin, Brooks looked around the bay at the sitting humans and the sitting monster. I have to ask, is this really how first contact scenarios usually go? Definitely not, said Lisa Grant. But I think we're making good progress. War Prime Kethvar found himself in a situation no Zephyrian commander had ever faced. His ultimate weapon was refusing to fight and appeared to be making friends with the enemy. The humans showed no fear, no respect for Zephyrian power, and no interest in surrendering. Worse, they were treating the Void Render like a person instead of a weapon. And the creature seemed to prefer this treatment to anything it had experienced in 2,000 years of service to the Empire. The demonstration of power had become something else entirely. The War Prime had no idea what to do next. The standoff in Cargo Bay 7 continued for nearly an hour. The Void Render remained sitting between the humans and Zephyrians, apparently content to serve as a peaceful barrier between the two groups. War Prime Kethvar stood rigid with frustration, while his warriors waited for orders that never came. Danny Rogers had found a more comfortable position, leaning against his storage container. The creature occasionally turned its massive head to check on him, making soft rumbling sounds that seemed almost concerned. I think it likes you, said Dr. Emma Collins, still recording data on her scanner. Its biorhythms spike positively every time it looks your way. Animals usually do, Danny replied. I've always been good with them, though I have to admit, this is the first time I've made friends with something from another dimension. Lieutenant Kevin Brooks was documenting everything on his tablet. The Zephyrian command structure is breaking down. Look at their body language. Half of them don't know what to do when their ultimate weapon refuses to fight. The Void Render suddenly made a new sound, different from anything it had produced before. It was multiple tones at once, complex and layered. The creature was clearly trying to communicate something specific. That sounded almost like language, said Engineer Betty Wilson. It was language, confirmed Emma Collins, checking her readings, but not any language in our database. I think it's trying to create its own way to talk to us. Ambassador Lisa Grant stood up slowly and approached the creature. Can you understand what we're saying? The Void Render looked down at her and made a single clear tone that everyone interpreted as yes. Have you been able to understand language this whole time? Another clear tone, this one obviously meaning yes, but with undertones of sadness. But no one ever tried to have a conversation with you before. The creature's response was longer and more complex, but the meaning was unmistakable. It was the sound of someone who had been alone for a very long time. Alex Parker felt something he had not expected to feel toward the Zephyrian's ultimate weapon: sympathy. 2,000 years of people only talking at you, never to you. That's rough. The Void Render turned its attention to Commander Parker and made a sound of agreement that was heavy with emotion. War Prime Kethvar watched this exchange with growing horror. Not only was his weapon refusing to fight, but it was forming emotional connections with the enemy. Everything about Zephyrian military doctrine was being turned upside down. "Void Render," he commanded with desperate authority. "You will return to your containment chamber and prepare for proper deployment." The creature looked at its commander for a long moment. Then it made a sound that was clearly negative. For the first time in its existence, the Void Render said no. "Did everyone else hear that?" asked Kevin Brooks. "Definitely a no," confirmed Betty Wilson. "And a pretty firm one." The creature turned back to the humans and made a series of questioning sounds, while gesturing with its tentacles toward the Zephyrians. Danny Rogers nodded as if he understood perfectly. "You're asking why they're so angry all the time, aren't you?" The Void Render's response was enthusiastic agreement. "That's a good question," Danny said. "I've been wondering the same thing. Lisa, any insights on angry alien psychology?" Ambassador Grant had been in enough difficult negotiations to recognize when the entire dynamic had shifted. "I think they're afraid," she said simply. "They've built their whole empire on being the most dangerous thing in any room. But we're not afraid of them. And now their ultimate weapon isn't afraid of us either." The Void Render made a sound that seemed thoughtful, as if considering this explanation. One of the younger Zephyrian warriors stepped forward hesitantly. "War Prime, perhaps we should consider returning to the ship and reassessing our strategy." Kethvar spun around to face his subordinate. "Are you suggesting retreat?" "I am suggesting that our current approach is not producing the desired results," the warrior said carefully. The Void Render was watching this exchange with obvious interest. It had never seen Zephyrians disagree with each other before. The creature seemed to be learning that even within hierarchical structures, individuals could have different opinions. Dr. Collins noticed something important. Its energy patterns are stabilizing. Whatever internal conflict it was experiencing is resolving itself. "In which direction?" asked Alex Parker. "Toward peaceful interaction," Emma said. "It's choosing friendship over fighting." The creature confirmed this assessment by making a gentle sound at the human delegation and moving slightly closer to Danny's storage container. "Well, that settles it," said Danny. "We've got ourselves a new friend. The question is, what do we do now?" War Prime Kethvar realized that his demonstration of power had become something else entirely. His ultimate weapon had not only refused to destroy the humans, but had actively chosen to protect them. More than that, it was demonstrating behaviors and capabilities he had never seen before. "This is not over," he said, but the words lacked conviction. "Actually," said Lisa Grant, "I think this is exactly what we needed. We've all learned something important here today." The Void Render made a sound of agreement and settled more comfortably into its sitting position. For the first time in 2,000 years, it was exactly where it wanted to be. 3 hours later, the cargo bay had been transformed into something resembling a comfortable meeting space. The humans had found cushions and portable chairs from the station's storage areas. The Void Render remained in its chosen sitting position, occasionally making conversational sounds that the human delegation had learned to interpret. Danny Rogers had positioned himself close enough to the creature to carry on what appeared to be a genuine dialogue. The beast would make complex tonal sounds, and Danny would respond as if he understood perfectly. "So you're saying you used to live in space between stars before the Zephyrians found you?" Danny asked. The Void Render made a series of sounds that conveyed loneliness and longing. "That sounds peaceful. Do you miss it?" The creature's response was clearly affirmative, with undertones of deep sadness. Dr. Emma Collins looked up from her scanner. "Its emotional patterns are incredibly complex. This isn't just an alien weapon, it's a displaced person." War Prime Kethvar had been standing in angry silence for the entire 3 hours, watching his ultimate weapon engage in friendly conversation with the humans. His own warriors had begun to sit down as well, drawn by the obvious comfort of the arrangement. "This is unprecedented," one of the Zephyrian warriors said quietly to another. "I have never seen the Void Render behave this way. It seems happier," the other replied just as quietly. Ambassador Lisa Grant saw an opportunity to redirect the entire negotiation. "War Prime Kethvar, I think we need to discuss the real issue here. The real issue is your species' refusal to surrender," he said, but his voice lacked its earlier conviction. "No. The real issue is that you've been keeping a person enslaved for 2,000 years and calling it a weapon," Lisa said firmly. The cargo bay fell silent. Even the Void Render stopped making sounds and turned its burning gaze toward the human. "Ambassador, the Void Render is not a person," Kethvar said slowly. "It is a tool of war." "Tools don't make friends," said Commander Alex Parker. "Tools don't have preferences about where they sit, and tools definitely don't refuse orders because they'd rather hang out with people who treat them nicely." The creature made a sound of strong agreement and moved slightly closer to the human delegation. Engineer Betty Wilson pulled out her tablet and began making notes. From an engineering perspective, treating any intelligent system as just a tool is incredibly inefficient. You never get optimal performance when the operator is unhappy. "The Void Render does not experience happiness or unhappiness," Kethvar insisted. The creature immediately made a sound that was obviously contradictory, with clear emotional undertones that suggested the War Prime was completely wrong. "I think it just told you that you don't know what you're talking about," said Kevin Brooks with a grin. The younger Zephyrian warrior who had spoken earlier stepped forward again. "War Prime, perhaps we should listen to what the humans are saying. The Void Render has never shown this level of autonomous behavior before." "You question my understanding of our own weapon?" Kethvar demanded. "I question whether we have ever truly understood it at all," the warrior replied boldly. The Void Render turned its attention to this exchange with obvious interest. It made encouraging sounds toward the younger Zephyrian, apparently approving of anyone willing to ask difficult questions. Danny Rogers noticed the creature's response. "Hey, I think it likes your friend there. Maybe because he's willing to think about things differently." The young Zephyrian warrior looked up at the massive creature with newfound wonder. "You can understand all of us, can't you? You've been listening to everything we say for centuries." The Void Render's response was clearly affirmative, but also carried notes of frustration and sadness. "All those battles, all those destroyed worlds," the warrior continued. "You understood what was happening. You knew those people were dying." The creature's next sound was low and mournful, filled with what could only be described as regret. Dr. Collins felt tears forming in her eyes. "It's been forced to destroy civilizations while fully understanding the consequences. That's not warfare. That's torture." War Prime Kethvar's world was falling apart around him. "The Void Render serves the Empire willingly." The creature made a sharp, angry sound and rose to its full height. For a moment, everyone thought it might finally attack, but instead, it moved to stand directly in front of Kethvar and made a long, complex statement that needed no translation. It was clearly expressing centuries of suppressed anger and resentment. The War Prime stepped back, his amber eyes wide with shock. His ultimate weapon was telling him exactly what it thought of him and his empire. "I think that's the first time it's ever been allowed to speak its mind," said Lisa Grant. "And it has a lot to say." The Void Render finished its statement and returned to its sitting position next to Danny Rogers. The creature made gentle sounds toward the human delegation, then turned to the young Zephyrian warrior and made similar encouraging sounds. "It's choosing sides," said Alex Parker. "But not based on species. It's choosing to support people who treat it with respect." Betty Wilson looked around the transformed cargo bay. "So what happens now? We can't exactly send it back to being a weapon after this." The Void Render made questioning sounds while looking between the humans and the sympathetic Zephyrian warrior. Danny Rogers understood first. "You're asking if you can stay with us, aren't you? You don't want to go back to destroying things." The creature's response was immediate and hopeful. "Well," said Lisa Grant, "I think we just solved our diplomatic crisis. War Prime Kethvar, We're prepared to offer asylum to any member of your expedition who would prefer not to participate in aggressive conquest. Including the Void Render? Asked the young warrior. Especially the Void Render, said Danny. Everyone deserves the right to choose their own path. The creature made sounds of pure joy and gently nudged Danny's shoulder with one massive tentacle. War Prime Kethvar stood alone among his warriors, watching his empire's greatest weapon pledge its loyalty to the very humans he had come to conquer. For the first time in his career, he faced the possibility that strength and fear were not the only paths to power. This conversation is not over, he said finally. No, agreed Ambassador Grant. But when we continue it, we'll all be sitting down as equals. That's how real negotiations work. The Void Render made one final sound, a complex tone that somehow conveyed gratitude, hope, and the promise of new beginnings. After 2,000 years of destruction, it had finally found its way home.